War Marshal Krelthos chose his first target carefully to send the strongest possible message to humanity and the rest of the galaxy. New Texas was a human colony in the Alpha Centauri system that had been built only 15 years earlier. 2 million humans lived there in cities that sparkled under the light of twin suns. The planet had farms and factories and schools and everything that made a world feel like home to the colonists who had traveled so far from Earth. The attack began at dawn local time when Council warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Krelthos brought 50 of his best ships for what should have been a simple demonstration of overwhelming force. The fleet moved in perfect formation toward the planet while broadcasting demands for immediate surrender. Any resistance would result in the complete destruction of all human settlements. Colonel Rick Hayes commanded the defense forces on New Texas Station, which orbited high above the planet's surface. He had 12 human warships and 30 smaller patrol craft to protect 2 million civilians. The numbers were impossible, but Hayes had spent his whole career preparing for situations where humans faced much stronger enemies. He ordered all civilian transports to begin emergency evacuation, while his warships moved to intercept the Council fleet. The battle unfolded exactly as every tactical computer had predicted it would. Human ships fired their missiles and railguns at maximum range, but the projectiles exploded harmlessly against Council energy shields. The alien warships responded with plasma cannons that cut through human armor like paper. Within the first hour, Hayes had lost half his fleet and gained nothing except a few minutes of delay for the evacuation ships. New Texas Station was a massive structure that housed 50,000 people and served as the military command center for the entire system. Council ships surrounded it and demanded surrender, but Hayes refused to give up. His remaining ships formed a protective circle around the station and continued fighting even though their weapons could barely scratch the enemy shields. The colonel knew he could not win, but he could buy time for more civilian ships to escape. Narration station fell after 6 hours of continuous bombardment. Council plasma beams punched through the hull in dozens of places, causing massive explosions and fires. Hayes died at his post, still giving orders to his surviving ships when the command center was destroyed. But his sacrifice had allowed almost 500,000 civilians to reach the evacuation ships and flee toward Earth. That was when Captain Susan Clark made the decision that changed everything. She commanded the human cruiser Liberty Bell, which was one of only 3 ships still fighting around the burning wreckage of New Texas Station. Her ship had lost weapons and engines, and life support was failing. Standard military doctrine said she should surrender to save the lives of her crew. Instead, Clark ordered her remaining crew to the escape pods and set her ship on a collision course with the largest Council warship. The Liberty Bell accelerated to maximum velocity using emergency chemical rockets, while Clark stayed alone on the bridge. She sent a final message to the Council fleet telling them that humans would never surrender and would never bow to alien masters. The impact was devastating. The Liberty Bell struck the Council flagship at nearly 1/10 the speed of light. The human ship was destroyed instantly, but the kinetic energy was so enormous that it overwhelmed the alien energy shields and tore a massive hole through the center of the enemy vessel. The flagship broke apart in a brilliant explosion that could be seen from the planet's surface. Other human captains saw what Clark had done and understood immediately. Their conventional weapons could not penetrate Council shields, but a ship moving at maximum velocity could punch through anything. The remaining 2 human vessels followed Clark's example and rammed into Council warships at full speed. 3 more alien ships were destroyed in the suicide attacks that cost the lives of over 1,000 human spacers. War Marshal Krelthos watched these ramming attacks with growing alarm. No species in 300 years of Council history had ever chosen death over surrender. The mathematical logic was simple. Dead crews could not fight again, but surrendered crews might be useful as slaves or hostages. Throwing away lives in hopeless attacks made no tactical sense at all. But humans did not think like other species when it came to freedom and survival. They had learned long ago that some things were more important than individual lives. They would rather die fighting than live as slaves. They would sacrifice themselves to hurt the enemy even if victory was impossible. This was something no Council species had ever encountered, and it terrified the alien commanders. The news of the New Texas battle spread across human space faster than the speed of light using quantum communication networks. Instead of breaking human morale like the Council had planned, the heroic sacrifice of Hayes and Clark and all the others had the opposite effect. Humans everywhere were inspired by the courage of their defenders and filled with rage at the aliens who had killed them. Recruitment centers on every human world were flooded with volunteers wanting to join the military. Factory workers quit their jobs to build weapons. Farmers left their fields to crew warships. Entire families moved to military bases to support the war effort. The Council attack had been meant to frighten humanity into submission, but instead, it awakened something primal and dangerous in the human spirit. Even more surprising were the reactions from other species throughout the galaxy. Secret rebel groups on Council worlds heard about the human ramming attacks and began planning their own acts of resistance. If these primitive newcomers could choose death over surrender, then maybe other species could find the courage to fight back against their oppressors. Captain Ben Taylor was stationed at Europa Base around Jupiter when news of New Texas reached the outer solar system. He commanded a squadron of patrol ships that were supposed to watch for Council scouts approaching Earth. When he heard about the ramming attacks, Taylor began developing new tactics that would use human advantages against alien weaknesses. The Council had superior technology and stronger ships, but they had grown complacent during centuries of easy victories. They expected enemies to fight by predictable rules and surrender when defeat became obvious. Humans did not follow those rules and would not surrender no matter how hopeless things looked. Taylor's new tactics involved hiding ships inside asteroid fields and launching surprise attacks when Council forces came too close. Human ships could maneuver better in tight spaces because their crews were willing to take risks that alien commanders would never accept. They could use the rocks as cover and turn entire asteroid belts into deadly mazes where numbers meant less than skill and determination. Dr. Emma Rodriguez received reports from Commander Parker's intelligence ships that confirmed her theories about Council weakness. The alien empire was already showing strain from the human rebellion. 3 member species had formally protested the war and demanded negotiations. Resistance movements on occupied worlds were becoming more active and bold. The Galactic Council had ruled through fear for 3 centuries, but fear only worked when victims believed their rulers were invincible. The destruction of 4 Council warships at New Texas had shown the galaxy that the mighty alien empire could bleed. If humans could kill Council ships, then maybe the empire was not as strong as everyone thought. War Marshal Krelthos sent urgent messages back to the Council station, warning that the human war would not be as easy as predicted. But the Crystal, beings who ran the government, refused to believe that primitive aliens could threaten their carefully built empire. They ordered Krelthos to continue the attack and crush human resistance quickly before other species got dangerous ideas about rebellion. The stage was set for the next phase of the war that would determine the fate of humanity and the future of the galaxy. Dr. Emma Rodriguez stood in her laboratory surrounded by screens showing intelligence reports from across Council space. The data was better than she had dared to hope, and worse than the Council feared. Revolution was spreading like wildfire through their empire as subject species watched humanity's defiant stand with growing inspiration. Her network of informants and allies had grown from a few academic contacts to a galaxy-spanning web of rebels and freedom fighters. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source on the hegemony homeworld. General Alex Turner had led a covert mission to infiltrate the insect-like aliens' most heavily guarded planet. What he found there changed everything humans thought they knew about the Council's military strength. The hegemony forces were not loyal volunteers but conscripts who had been forced into service after their own worlds were conquered generations ago. Turner made contact with underground resistance cells that had been waiting decades for the right moment to strike. The sight of humans ramming their ships into Council vessels had given these oppressed beings the courage they needed to begin open rebellion. Secret weapons caches were being uncovered across hegemony space. Communication networks that had been hidden for years were activating to coordinate uprising plans. Similar reports came from other Council worlds as Parker's intelligence ships continued their dangerous missions. The Zephyrian crystal miners who provided raw materials for Council technology were sabotaging their own production facilities. The aquatic Nereids who maintained the alien communication networks were allowing rebel messages to pass through their systems without detection. Even some members of supposedly loyal species were questioning orders and refusing to fight against human colonies. But the most important development was happening in the human shipyards scattered throughout the solar system. Kate Johnson's Equalizer weapons had gone into mass production using every factory and manufacturing facility that humans could spare from civilian needs. The prototype plasma cannons that had seemed impossible just months ago were now being mounted on hundreds of human warships. The first test of the new weapons came at Europa Base, where Captain Ben Taylor had been preparing his asteroid field tactics. A Council patrol squadron arrived to scout human defenses in the Jupiter system, but found something completely different from what their intelligence reports had predicted. Instead of primitive human ships with crude weapons, they faced an enemy that had learned to combine alien technology with human innovation. Taylor's ships emerged from hiding places among the ice-covered rocks of Jupiter's moons and opened fire with the Equalizer cannons. The synchronized plasma pulses punched through Council energy shields like they were made of paper. 3 alien ships were destroyed in the first volley, and 2 more were crippled before they could respond. The surviving Council vessel fled back toward their lines carrying news that would shock War Marshal Krelthos. The Battle of Europa Station marked the beginning of human military superiority in space combat. The Council had expected to face the same weak opponents they had crushed at New Texas. Instead, they found an enemy that had adapted and grown stronger in the weeks since their defeat. Human ships equipped with Equalizer weapons could now fight Council vessels on equal terms and win through superior tactics and determination. News of the Europa victory spread across human space and beyond. Rebel groups throughout the galaxy received confirmation that the mighty Council could not only be hurt, but actually defeated in open battle. Uprisings that had been planned for months suddenly accelerated as freedom fighters decided the time for action had finally arrived. The political situation for the Council deteriorated with shocking speed. The Aquatic Congress formally withdrew their support for the war against humanity and recalled all their ships to defend their home systems against internal rebellion. The Mining Guild announced they would no longer provide resources for military operations until their grievances about working conditions were addressed. Even some Vorthak crystal beings began questioning whether this war was worth the risk to their empire. Admiral Jake Morrison received reports of these developments while planning the next phase of human military operations. The strategic situation had completely reversed from the dark days after New Texas. Instead of facing overwhelming enemy superiority, humans now had technological parity and growing numbers of allies throughout Council space. Morrison began preparing for something no human leader had thought possible just weeks earlier: an offensive campaign that would carry the war into enemy territory. Captain Lisa Hart worked with Taylor and other field commanders to develop new tactics that would maximize human advantages. The Equalizer weapons gave human ships the firepower to fight Council vessels, but humans still had superior flexibility and willingness to take risks. They could use hit-and-run attacks to wear down enemy forces while avoiding the kind of massive fleet battles that had always favored the Council. The key was to keep Council forces off balance and unable to concentrate their remaining loyal units for a decisive strike against Earth. Human raids on alien supply lines and communication networks would force the enemy to spread their ships across dozens of star systems. Meanwhile, human production facilities continued building more warships and weapons, while rebel uprisings diverted Council attention away from the war. War Marshal Krelthos found himself fighting a completely different conflict than the one he had planned. Instead of a quick demonstration of overwhelming force followed by human surrender, he faced a galaxy-wide rebellion with humanity at its center. His forces were being stretched thin, trying to maintain control over multiple star systems, while also fighting an increasingly capable human military. The insect commander's tactical computers could no longer calculate victory probabilities because too many variables had changed. Rebel attacks on Council infrastructure meant he could not rely on supply lines or reinforcements arriving on schedule. Human weapons technology had eliminated his advantage in ship-to-ship combat. Most dangerous of all, the political foundation of Council power was crumbling, as subject species openly defied orders from their alien masters. Dr. Rodriguez received intelligence reports showing the extent of Council weakness. 12 different Worlds were experiencing active rebellions, with more joining the resistance every day. 3 member species had formally demanded an end to the war against humanity. The Council's attempts to maintain order were failing, as their own security forces began questioning orders and switching sides. The turning point came when a major hegemony fleet commander named Claxtor announced that his ships would no longer participate in attacks on human colonies. Instead, his forces would return to hegemony space to protect civilian populations from Council retaliation. Other military units followed this example, as alien soldiers chose loyalty to their own people over obedience to distant masters. Speaker Zethkar called emergency sessions of the Council leadership, but found himself facing opposition from former allies who now blamed him for starting an unwinnable war. The Crystal Being's authority was being challenged for the first time in his long career. As violence spread throughout the Empire he had helped build and maintain for centuries, human forces prepared for their first major offensive operation against Council territory. Admiral Morrison planned a series of coordinated strikes that would liberate rebel worlds while capturing vital enemy infrastructure. The goal was not conquest, but creating enough chaos to force the Council into negotiations from a position of weakness. Captain Ben Taylor was selected to lead the first assault on a Council military base in the Beta Centauri system. His squadron of ships equipped with equalizer weapons would test whether humans could successfully attack and hold enemy territory. The outcome of this battle would determine whether the war could be won through military action or would require years of costly fighting. The galaxy watched and waited as 2 very different visions of the future prepared to clash among the stars. The Council's age of enforced order was ending, but what would replace it remained to be seen. President Danny Walsh walked slowly up the white stone steps of the United Nations building in New Geneva. The morning sun was bright, but he felt cold inside as he thought about the words he was going to say. Behind him walked the most important leaders of humanity. Admiral Morrison was there along with Captain Hart and dozens of others who would help fight the war that was coming. News cameras from every human world pointed at the small stage where he would speak to the galaxy. The speech was short, but it would echo across the stars for generations. Walsh looked directly into the main camera and spoke in a calm, clear voice that carried to every human world and every alien species listening. He told the Galactic Council that humanity respectfully declined their ultimatum. Humans would continue to explore space and build new colonies and make friends with other species. They would not surrender their freedom or their future, no matter what threats were made against them. The reaction from the Council station was exactly what everyone expected. Speaker Zethkar immediately called a war session and appointed War Marshal Krelthos of the Hegemony to lead the punishment fleet. Krelthos was known throughout Council space as the most brutal military commander they had. His species looked like giant insects, with razor-sharp claws and no mercy for enemies. He had crushed 7 different rebellions in the past century and never lost a single battle. Within days, Council warships began moving toward human space from bases scattered across their empire. The ships came from all 7 member worlds, bringing their best technology and most experienced crews. They moved in perfect formation like a deadly river of metal flowing toward Earth and its colonies. Every human with access to long-range sensors could see them coming and count the days until the war began. But while the Council prepared for a quick and easy victory, something unexpected was happening in the research labs of human space. Dr. Emma Rodriguez was a scientist who studied alien biology and culture. She had spent years learning about the different species that made up the Galactic Council. Most people thought she was just a curious academic, but Emma had been preparing for this day since first contact 50 years ago. Emma discovered something that changed everything humans thought they knew about their enemy. The Council was not the unified alliance it pretended to be. Looking at historical records and intercepted communications, she found cracks in the foundation of their empire. 4 of the 7 member species had joined the Council only after losing terrible wars. They had not chosen to be part of the alliance. They had been conquered and forced to serve. The hegemony was the military arm of the Council, but the other species provided resources and technology because they had no choice. The Vorthak controlled the government and made all the big decisions. The crystal beings had convinced the others that joining the council was better than being destroyed. But many aliens still remembered their freedom and wanted it back. Rebellion was always just under the surface, waiting for the right moment to explode. Commander Steve Parker led the most dangerous mission in human history. He took small ships disguised as asteroid mining vessels deep into Council territory to gather intelligence. The ships looked harmless and moved slowly like civilian craft, but they carried the most advanced sensors humans had ever built. Parker and his crews risked capture and death to learn the truth about Council worlds. What they found was better than anyone had dared to hope. On at least 6 Council worlds there were signs of unrest and resistance movements. Secret messages flew between rebel groups on different planets. Weapons and supplies were being hidden in preparation for uprising. The conquered species had been watching humanity with growing excitement and hope. If the humans could stand up to the Council, maybe others could find the courage to fight back too. Parker's intelligence ships also discovered Council military secrets that would prove vital in the coming war. They learned about supply routes and communication networks and weak points in Council defenses. They found out which species provided what resources and how the Council moved reinforcements between star systems. Most importantly, they learned that the Council had never fought a real war in over 100 years. Their military was designed for crushing weak rebellions, not fighting determined enemies. Meanwhile, on Mars, the greatest engineering project in human history was taking place, in secret. Kate Johnson was a brilliant civilian engineer who had been working on reverse engineering captured Council technology for years. She had studied every piece of alien equipment that humans had been able to acquire through trade or salvage. Her team worked around the clock in hidden facilities built inside the Red Planet's largest canyons. Kate's breakthrough came when she found a way to combine human innovation with alien technology. The Council species were advanced, but they had become comfortable with their superiority. They built their weapons and shields the same way for centuries without much innovation. Humans were newer to space technology, but they were still learning and adapting and trying new ideas. The prototype weapon that emerged from Kate's lab was something no Council engineer had ever imagined. It used human targeting systems combined with modified alien plasma technology. The weapon could punch through Council energy shields by hitting them with multiple synchronized pulses instead of one big blast. Kate called it the equalizer because it gave human ships a chance to fight back against superior enemies. Production of the new weapons began immediately in shipyards, hidden throughout the solar system. Every available factory was converted to military production. Civilian ships were retrofitted with weapons and armor. Even passenger liners and cargo vessels were turned into warships. Humanity was preparing for total war with everything the Council fleet continued its slow advance toward human space with Krelthos confident of easy victory. His tactical computers showed overwhelming superiority in every category that mattered. Numbers of ships, size of weapons, strength of defenses, experience of crews. Every calculation pointed to complete Council victory within weeks of the first battle. But Krelthos had never fought humans before. He did not know that they had spent their entire history as a species learning how to fight larger and stronger enemies. He did not understand that humans got more dangerous when backed into corners. He had no idea that his enemy was about to surprise the entire galaxy with weapons and tactics that would change space warfare forever. The first battle was only days away when both sides made their final preparations. The Council expected another easy conquest to add to their long list of victories. The humans prepared to show the galaxy what happened when someone tried to destroy their freedom. Neither side knew that this war would end the age of Council dominance forever. The massive station hung in the dark space above the planet like a giant metal moon. Inside its cold halls, the Galactic Council of 7 Worlds met for the most important meeting in 300 years. 7 different alien species sat around the huge table made of black stone that came from a dead world far away. Each representative looked different from the others, but they all shared one thing today. They were all angry about the humans. Speaker Zethkar was the leader of this meeting. His body was made of living crystal that changed colors when he felt strong emotions. Right now those crystals glowed angry red as he stood up to speak to the other council members. He was from the Vorthak people who had been the first to create this council so long ago. His voice sounded like glass breaking when he spoke. The human problem started 50 years ago, when the strange new species had first sent radio signals into space from their small blue world. The Council had watched them for years, thinking they would be slow to grow like most young races. But the humans surprised everyone by learning fast and moving even faster. They built ships that could travel between stars. They found new worlds to live on. They made friends with alien races that the Council had kept weak and separated for good reasons. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship far away from the Council station. He was a tall man with gray hair who had spent most of his life in space. His uniform was clean and pressed even though he had been working for 20 hours straight. The message from the Council had just arrived and he read it 3 times to make sure he understood every word. His hands shook slightly as he held the metal tablet that contained the most dangerous words any human had ever seen. The message was simple but terrible. Humanity had 30 standard days to do 3 things or face total destruction. First, they had to stop all expansion beyond their home solar system and return to Earth and its nearby planets. Second, they had to give up all their faster-than-light travel technology to the Council. Third, they had to accept Council observers on all human worlds who would watch everything humans did and make sure they followed Council rules. Captain Lisa Hart was the smartest military mind the humans had. She worked with Admiral Morrison on all the big decisions about defending Earth and its colonies. When she heard about the ultimatum, her first thought was to check how strong the enemy was compared to humans. The numbers were not good at all. The Council had more than 2,000 warships spread across their empire. Each ship was bigger and stronger than anything humans had built. They had energy shields that could stop most weapons. They had plasma cannons that could destroy a human city from orbit. Humans had only 300 ships total, and most of them were small. They had nuclear weapons and railguns and missiles, but none of those would work well against Council shields. The biggest human ship was smaller than the smallest Council warship. If this became a real war, the humans would lose badly and quickly. But Lisa Hart was not the type of person to give up when things looked impossible. She started making plans for how humans could fight, even if they could not win. Maybe they could slow down the Council forces. Maybe they could make the war cost so much that the aliens would want to stop. Maybe they could find allies among the other species that the Council ruled. President Danny Walsh called an emergency meeting in the rebuilt United Nations building. Representatives from every human world came as fast as their ships could carry them. The debate went on for hours as people argued about what to do. Some said they should accept the ultimatum because fighting would mean the end of the human race. Others said that accepting would also mean the end, because humans would become slaves forever. The Council had made this choice to show the galaxy that no species could challenge their power. They had ruled for 3 centuries by making examples of anyone who tried to grow too strong or too independent. Usually, one big battle was enough to make troublesome species surrender. After that, the defeated aliens became part of the Council empire and followed orders without question. But the Council members had never dealt with humans before. They did not understand that humans had spent their whole history fighting against impossible odds. Every human child learned stories about times when their ancestors had faced much stronger enemies and refused to give up. They learned about small groups of fighters who held mountain passes against huge armies. They learned about tiny countries that fought off invasions by much bigger nations. They learned that sometimes the most important thing was not winning, but refusing to kneel. The vote in the United Nations was close but clear. Humanity would not accept the ultimatum. They would not give up their freedom to explore the galaxy. They would not become another conquered species in the Council empire. President Walsh prepared to send the answer that would either save the human race or doom it forever. The Council waited at their station for the human response. Speaker Zethkar was confident that the primitive species would see reason when faced with overwhelming force. No intelligent race would choose destruction over submission. The mathematical truth was simple and clear. The Council had thousands of ships and the humans had hundreds. The Council had advanced technology and the humans had crude weapons. The Council had 3 centuries of experience in conquest, and the humans had never fought a real space war. What the Council did not understand was that humans had something more dangerous than ships or weapons or experience. They had the absolute refusal to accept defeat. They had the willingness to die rather than live as slaves. They had the stubborn belief that freedom was worth any price. These things could not be counted like ships or measured like weapons, but they would prove to be the most powerful forces in the coming war. The message went out from Earth to the Council Station, traveling at the speed of light across the vast, empty spaces between stars. When it arrived, Speaker Zethkar would learn that humanity had made its choice. The war that would change the galaxy forever was about to begin. The final assault on the Council Station began at dawn on Earth time, though there was no sun in the deep space where the massive alien structure hung like a metal fortress among the stars. Admiral Jake Morrison led a fleet of 300 human warships supported by rebel vessels from a dozen different species who had joined the fight for freedom. The combined force represented something the galaxy had never seen before. A voluntary alliance of free peoples united against oppression instead of an empire built on conquest and fear. War Marshal Krelthos made his last stand with the remaining Council loyalists in the heavily defended space around their government center. His forces had been reduced to fewer than 800 ships as rebellion and desertion tore apart the military structure he had spent his career building. Many of his best commanders had returned to their home worlds to protect their own people. From the chaos spreading across Council space, the battle was fierce but brief. Human ships armed with equalizer weapons punched through Council defenses, while rebel forces attacked from unexpected directions. The aliens had prepared for a traditional fleet engagement, but found themselves fighting a completely different kind of war. Enemy ships appeared from asteroid fields and gas clouds where no military force should have been able to hide. Coordinated strikes hit multiple targets simultaneously, making it impossible to mount an effective defense. Captain Susan Clark's sacrifice at New Texas had taught humans that ramming attacks could break through any defense, but now they had better weapons and no longer needed to die to win battles. The equalizer cannons could destroy Council ships from safe distances, while human tactics kept enemy forces confused and off balance. Within 6 hours, the great station's outer defenses had fallen, and boarding parties were fighting their way through the alien corridors. Speaker Zethkar retreated to the deepest levels of the station as human marines and rebel fighters battled. Council security forces in the crystal-lined halls where the galactic government had met for 3 centuries. The crystal being's body had turned dark purple with fear and rage as reports reached him of the total collapse of everything he had worked to build and maintain. But the real defeat of the Council happened not in the violent corridors of their station, but in the communication centers where former subjects broadcast messages of independence to the galaxy. The hegemony formally announced their withdrawal from the Council and declared the formation of a new confederation based on voluntary membership and mutual defense. The Aquatic Congress proclaimed their independence and invited other species to join them in peaceful cooperation instead of forced submission. Captain Nancy Cooper led the team that liberated the first Council prison world, where political dissidents and rebel leaders had been held for decades. What they found there shocked even experienced human soldiers who thought they understood alien cruelty. Thousands of beings from dozens of different species had been imprisoned simply for speaking out against Council rule or refusing to surrender their world's resources to alien masters. The prisoners told stories that revealed the true nature of Council governance. The 7 member species had not created their empire through diplomacy or voluntary association, but through systematic conquest and intimidation. Any world that refused to join was attacked and destroyed. Any species that showed signs of independence was crushed before they could become a threat. The galaxy had been ruled by fear disguised as order for 300 years. Dr. Emma Rodriguez documented these testimonies and broadcast them across human space and beyond. The revelations destroyed any remaining legitimacy the Council might have claimed and inspired even more uprisings on worlds that had remained neutral. Species that had been considering supporting the Council against humanity now joined the growing rebellion instead. The end came not with a final battle, but with a political collapse that scattered Council forces across the galaxy. War Marshal Krelthos was captured trying to escape the station in a small ship loaded with stolen treasure. Speaker Zethkar was found in his private chambers surrounded by the broken crystals that had once been symbols of his authority. The mighty Galactic Council of Seven Worlds simply ceased to exist as its member species returned home to deal with their own internal problems. President Danny Walsh addressed the galaxy from the same podium where he had refused the Council ultimatum months earlier. But this time he was not speaking as the leader of a small and threatened human nation. He spoke as the representative of a new galactic community based on freedom and voluntary cooperation instead of conquest and forced submission. The HFY speech was broadcast to every world where intelligent beings lived and translated into hundreds of different languages. Walsh announced the formation of the Galactic Assembly, where all species would have equal voices regardless of their military strength or technological advancement. There would be no more empires built on the ruins of conquered worlds. No more subject peoples forced to serve distant masters. The Age of Freedom had begun. Captain Ben Taylor was among the first humans to visit the former Council worlds and help establish new governments based on the consent of the governed rather than the power of the strongest. What he found amazed him. Species that had been enemies for centuries were learning to work together. Planets that had been strip-mined to feed the Council war machine were beginning to heal. Billions of beings who had lived their entire lives under alien rule were experiencing freedom for the first time. But the greatest victory was not military or political, but philosophical. The Council had ruled by convincing the galaxy that their system was the only alternative to chaos and war. They had taught entire civilizations that freedom was dangerous, and that security could only come through submission to a higher authority. Humanity had proven that free peoples could defend themselves and build something better than empire. Kate Johnson's equalizer weapons were shared freely with any species that wanted to defend their independence. The technology that had broken Council military supremacy became the foundation for a new kind of galactic defense based on mutual aid rather than imperial domination. No single species would ever again have the power to conquer all the others. Admiral Morrison became the first Director General of the Galactic Defense Force, which was created to protect member worlds from external threats and internal tyranny. Unlike the Council military, which had been used to crush rebellions and enforce submission, the new force was designed to preserve freedom and prevent the rise of future empires. The former Council station was converted into the headquarters of the Galactic Assembly, where representatives from free worlds met to discuss common problems and coordinate voluntary cooperation. The Blackstone Table, where alien tyrants had once planned conquests, became a forum where equals debated how to build a better future for all galactic civilizations. Years later, when historians studied the war that had changed everything, they all agreed on one crucial point. The Council had made their fatal mistake, not when they attacked human colonies or threatened Earth with destruction. Their real error had been assuming that any species would choose slavery over death when given the choice. They had never understood that some things were more important than survival, and that the desire for freedom was stronger than the fear of destruction. The decision that was meant to prove humanity could be defeated had instead proven that no empire built on fear could survive when its subjects found the courage to say no. The galaxy would never be the same again.